Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. So we'll get started in just a minute or so. Wait for some more people to log in. Okay. Well, go ahead and get started, but good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the Hive's Think Tank webinar series. My name is Olivia and I'm the operations manager at the Hive. We're super excited to have everyone join us and learn more about cancer care and the health tech industry with Dr. Michael Seiden, former president of US Oncology, Geoffrey Eich, CEO of Note Therapeutics, and Lavi, the CEO of Canopy. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and go over quickly the best practices for today's webinar and explain what the Hive Think Tank does before I pass it over to Ravi, the Hive's founder and managing partner. So we do love questions, so I would encourage everyone to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask our presenters any questions. They'll have some time at the end of the panel discussion, about 10-15 minutes or so, and then they'll be able to answer any questions or any comments that the audience has. And then for everyone, the session is being recorded and will be available to view later on the Hive's YouTube channel. So with that, the Hive Think Tank is an ecosystem of thought leaders, corporations, and entrepreneurs. We're an event content platform that focuses on AI, 5G, blockchain, Web3, enterprise, health, and so much more. So we do host events almost every other week on cutting edge technologies and in topics such as the ones I mentioned previously, like enterprise and health. And then we also do publish kind of thought leadership pieces on Medium. So I really encourage everyone to follow our meetup group and also our Medium page, which I will link in the chat just shortly later on. And then I also like to thank our sponsors, TIBCO, Avanta Ventures, and Gamuda for their support and also for the audience. If you are interested to getting involved with the Hive Think Tank, please feel free to reach out to me at olivia@hivedata.com. And then make sure to also follow us along on LinkedIn and also tweet us on Twitter and use the hashtags HiveData and also @HiveData on LinkedIn. Cool. And then just quickly before I turn it over to Ravi, we are hosting 2 upcoming events in August. The first one being with our portfolio company, Geminis, and this one will be next Thursday around data and AI. And then the second one that we have will be later on in mid-August. And then this one is also with another one of our portfolio companies, Blockstream, as well as the global CTO of TIBCO with Nelson Petrzak, who is actually releasing an ebook soon. So we'll share more details in the chat with to download his ebook.
And for fans of blockchain and decentralization and DAOs, I strongly encourage you to join this event. If you just go back to the previous slide, Olivia. So AI models have had issues with a lot of domains outside of kind of consumer domains. And consumer domains, there's huge amounts of data available. So traditional models work pretty well. These models need a lot of data. They need a lot of high quality data to operate. And that's sort of in the kind of spaces that Facebook and Google and TikTok are, you see that volume of data. But in a lot of other applications, such as the industrial applications where Schlumberger, this faculty member from University of Michigan and Geminis are going to focus on, you don't see such high volumes of data. So there's a whole movement around lean data. And so that's going to be the topic of this discussion.
Perfect. Cool. So Ravi, I will go ahead and let you take that over and then I'll have you introduce the panel as well.
So very briefly, the Hive is an early stage venture capital fund. And what is also unique about the Hive is that we are very active, operationally active, and collaborate with the founders to build their company. So we are not simply sort of giving them money, but we are sort of joining the hip with them and helping kind of drive progress. Here you see sort of the different areas that we are focused on. And the common thread to everything we do is data and AI. And so our point of view since 2012 is that AI is going to drive new opportunities and disrupt virtually every segment. And so this is our focus. If you go to the next slide, please. So we have a global presence here. So the Hive, I'm based, Olivia and I are out of our Palo Alto office, and we focus on North America, but we have separate entities in Brazil, Southeast Asia, India, and we are expecting 2 other Hive entities to come up soon. The Hive in Saudi Arabia in collaboration with Saudi Aramco, and the Hive Europe to be based in Paris and Monaco. So if you have any interest in knowing more about it, please reach out to me or Olivia. And if you're an entrepreneur, please do reach out to us. We love to connect with you. Next slide, please, Olivia. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Seiden. Dr. Seiden has been the president most recently of US Oncology, which is part of McKesson. Prior to that, he was CEO and president of Fox Chase Cancer Center. He's a long-time practitioner in the oncology space. In the early part of his career, he was at Mass General, he was at Harvard Medical, and we are very excited to have Dr. Seiden here today moderating this session. At the Hive, we've worked closely with Dr. Seiden across a number of projects. So if you are today going to be on Twitter and have any thoughts that you want to post, please use the hashtag HiveData so others can follow you. Please use the Q&A button, not the chat button, but the Q&A button in the bottom to pose any questions, and Dr. Seiden and this esteemed panel will get to them. Great. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Seiden.
Thank you, Ravi and Olivia. Really great to be with all of you today, and a hearty welcome. Today, we're going to be talking to the CEO of 2 what I find to be really interesting companies that are looking to address some of the gaps in cancer care. And before I introduce the leaders of these 2 companies, I thought I would just give a few introductory comments, both as an oncologist and perhaps a little bit more importantly about being a family member, having lost a father, a mother, and a wife to cancer over the last couple of decades. This year, there's going to be 1.6 million people in the United States who are going to hear from their caregiver that they have a new cancer diagnosis. And there's probably no word in the English lexicon that is more disturbing than the word cancer. And while there's been lots of improvements in the understanding of the science of cancer, there's been new therapeutics that have been developed, it is still undeniable that the treatment of cancer in 2022 is still laborious, cumbersome, and unfortunately for many patients, the prognosis is still guarded. In addition to the clinical care, which is often very disruptive to your family life, to your professional life, there's a lot of financial toxicity. AARP recently noted that a cancer diagnosis in the first year is typically associated with $100,000 to $150,000 in costs. And with the growing prevalence of high deductible healthcare plans, there is a significant amount of financial toxicity that goes along with the clinical toxicity associated with cancer care. And finally, cancer care generates, and a cancer diagnosis generates a lot of mental health stresses, depression, anxiety, and what has sometimes been referred to as a loss of self, meaning a person's vision of themselves as a caregiver, a spouse, a parent, a professional is often radically changed by a cancer diagnosis. And this creates this new normal, which for many patients doesn't feel very normal at all. Of course, we've known about these challenges for a long time, but the delivery of healthcare has changed. In the 1980s and early 1990s, cancer care was generally between the patient and the physician when the patient was in the physician's office. Fast forward to the late 1990s, early 2000s, cancer care went from a doctor-patient sort of event to a cancer team that included nurse practitioners, physician assistants, financial counselors, potentially a navigator, maybe a social worker if you were lucky. But still, the majority of these teams interacted with the patient when the patient was physically in the office. In the last decade, and in particular, accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been an increasing interest and need to understand how technology can help with this patient journey. Not only the treatment in the doctor's office, but all of the other things that need to be managed. More of a holistic 24/7, including when the patient is not in front of their care team. Which brings us to the discussion today. So with that as an introduction, the challenges of the cancer care journey, let me first turn to Geoffrey Eich. Geoffrey is the CEO of Note Therapeutics. Geoffrey, tell us a little bit about yourself, Blue Note, and what your company's doing.
Thanks, Dr. Seiden. It's very nice to be with everyone today. We founded Blue Note in 2019 to try to expand access to the kinds of holistic cancer care that are available in many of the top cancer centers, where somewhere in the range of maybe 15% of Americans get their cancer care. And to take that into a digital format and make it available throughout all of community and hospital-based oncology across the United States. And our objective was to expand access to the roughly 80 to 85% of Americans who don't necessarily have access to the same level of resource that we have in some of our top cancer centers. And we had three basic principles. We said we wanted to generate high quality clinical evidence. We wanted to take that evidence to the FDA and have them be able to evaluate the benefit and risk of our products. And we wanted our products to be a part of every American's healthcare insurance so that we were not contributing to the financial toxicities of cancer. It's been an amazing journey. We found that we were, I guess, somewhat surprisingly first in the space, that there were researchers in the government and in academia who had been waiting for an opportunity to really focus on translation of these technologies that are available in top cancer centers to be most available to all Americans. And we've taken it and run with it through the pandemic. And today we have 4 products that are coming to market in short succession. 2 have been granted breakthrough status by FDA. Our first is available in both English and Spanish and is completing its registrational study. And our second product will complete or will initiate its registrational study next year. So we're really excited about what we can do. And just as a note for how we want to do it, we've surrounded ourselves with people who, like you, Dr. Seiden, and also probably so many of us have experienced cancer. And whether that's in the role of the patient or in the role of the caregiver, we are working together as a community to advance these interventions that can help people cope with everything that cancer throws, from diagnosis to treatment to survivorship.
Jeff, your company is particularly interested in addressing some of the mental health issues that are associated with cancer, and you've got a lead product, I believe it's called Attune, which is a digital therapeutic. What is a digital therapeutic?
Yeah, it's a great question. The digital therapeutic is really a medical device, and the format of the medical device is that it appears in a digital format on a screen of some kind. Because access to those 80 to 85% of Americans is so important to us, the device or the screen that we've chosen is the mobile phone. That's just the most ubiquitous way to be able to provide care to as many patients as possible at the lowest possible cost for the patient. And what we do is we take what would have been a face-to-face experience in a top cancer center over 10 weeks that included, going into the center, parking, going into an appointment, maybe at a convenient time, maybe not. And we transition that to be a much more personal experience. We use technology to make sure that each patient can relate and personalize their course of therapy and achieve really the same clinical outcome. That's our objective, and that's what we rely on FDA to help be the arbiter of when we submit that data to FDA.
So talk to me a little bit about, this sounds like a big unmet need, even in big academic cancer centers, finding a psychiatrist or psychologist who had expertise both in depression management or anxiety management and a working understanding of, cancer and the journey a cancer patient goes through. Those people were hard to find. When I was at Mass General, a very big hospital with lots of patients, we had, during my early tenure, only one individual who was trained to do that, and we had a lot of patients. So, so this sounds useful, and I do have a cell phone, and it has a lot of apps on it, but those are all free. So this sounds like a fantastic idea. How do you have a sustainable company? Is this a free application, or how would your company grow?
Yeah, one of the things that's been most exciting about Blue Note, and you're alluding to the patient's benefit, the convenience, the ability to use a therapeutic at a time, maybe it's 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning before a scan. It's at a time that generally human providers aren't available in the optimal settings. And for so many Americans, there simply are not enough healthcare professionals to give this kind of care in any setting. So our unique position is that we create a win-win-win for patients, providers, and payers. And in so many parts of healthcare, you can sometimes get 2 of those 3, but it's very, very difficult to be able to provide value to all 3 important stakeholders in healthcare. And what we've learned is that unaddressed stress associated with cancer costs somewhere between $15,000 and $19,000 more per patient per year for about 2.5 years after diagnosis. And so our business model is to allow those healthcare resources to be used in a more efficient way through the use of our devices, and to make sure that the patient is granted access by their physician and that this is covered by their health insurance. So our objective is to not have this be a burden to patients, but instead help to create value that can, for example, create more resources to be used on some of the advanced therapeutics and other parts of our societal investment in science and technology to fight cancer.
Okay, well, that's you had mentioned the FDA. So it sounds like very similar to a drug you need to, or a device, you need to provide data that this is safe. Obviously, it's a little bit different than a typical drug like a pace or a device like a pacemaker or a drug where you look for a tumor to shrink. So just a couple of words around how you're trying to prove to the various stakeholders, in particular the FDA, that this device, is delivering, what you've mentioned.
Yeah, it's really important. One of the parts that, I mentioned at the outset, high quality clinical evidence, the kind of clinical evidence that is detailed, reduces bias at every point in the study design that we can, is blinded, so that we're working to reduce bias in every way. We design our studies to be peer reviewed and published, so that the scientific community can assess the strengths and the limitations of our studies. And FDA has been a really good thought partner in helping us identify ways that they and we can feel confident and then pass that confidence on to the oncology community, that our devices will have a measurable, demonstrable improvement in patient overall well-being. So some of our endpoints are psychological in nature. Others look at healthcare resource utilization and whether the use of our devices may be able to reduce, kinds of healthcare resource use that are not optimal for the patient and are not optimal for the healthcare system. We're working with a number of partners to do this. It's a challenging time to do clinical research in cancer with a lot of the disruption that we've seen from COVID and other stresses on our healthcare system. And so we found a lot of really novel ways to collect this data. We're also very sensitive to the needs of cancer patients in the middle of circumstances which can be really difficult for someone who's immune compromised. So we're using ways to reach patients to participate in our studies at home. And just a lot of wonderful partners, from payers to academic sites who've been willing to partner with us on this research.
Yeah. So as a last question, and once again, for those of you listening in, please drop in questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them in the last 10 minutes or so of the hour. But the last question, in Ravi's introduction, he was talking about technology and new business practices and decentralizing. Do you want to say anything more about, who some of your key partners have been in actually identifying patients? Because this is part of the new world of clinical research.
Sure. One of our views all along has been to use technology as broadly as we can to really support the healthcare community. And we're, I think, quite humbled by everything that our healthcare providers, from our physicians to our nurses and APPs, have done for folks. We know it's busy times in cancer care and busy time in every hospital in this country. So one of the things that we've been able to do is use social media to improve people's awareness of the ability and the opportunity to participate in our trials. That's been remarkable. At this point, I would say, probably in excess of 14,500 patients have reached out to be able to have the opportunity to participate in our studies. I'm humbled and grateful for each of them taking the time to work with us to not only advance the science that we're trying to put in front of all patients, but there's really a spirit of paying it forward for the next set of patients, and the value of people's experience that they're contributing, whether it's in our trials or in the design of our products. Gratitude is a word that we express frequently at Blue Note.
Wow. Well, thank you, Geoffrey. And I'm going to turn now to our second guest, an individual I've had the privilege of knowing for a couple of years now, Lavi Kwiatkowsky, who's the CEO of Canopy. Unlike Geoffrey, who comes from the world of pharma, Lavi's a technologist. He's a computer technology guy. Lavi, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get into the cancer field, and what is Canopy?
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Mike. It's really nice being on the panel with you. So thanks for having me. As Mike points out, my background is not in healthcare. So it was quite a turn of events when I ended up in cancer care. But we can touch on that briefly if you'd like, Mike. But I think what Mike is alluding to is the fact that I started my career in the Israeli intelligence forces for 6 years. So there's a lot of large-scale data collection and processing there. And then following that, an Israeli tech company where we had really large, hundreds of millions of daily active users sort of scale. And I had a personal health problem, and a few members of my family had struggled with and eventually passed due to cancer. And I think the common denominator that I saw was that, wow, I think there is low-hanging fruit here. Like I truly believed we could make it so much better. And it was such a powerful belief that I couldn't settle the dissonance of working in tech, knowing that if we worked in health tech, we could save so many lives. And so I quit my job and I started Canopy.
So what is Canopy?
So Canopy is a platform built for care. What that really means is that there are so many software tools to do administrative tasks or to document what you do or to do billing, but do providers actually have a platform wholly built for care? And so our mission is to make sure that every cancer patient who walks into a cancer center to get treatment, they actually get the maximum benefit and the best possible experience from that treatment. So I think while in the cancer center, we do an incredible job at delivering high quality care across academic, hospital-based, and community oncology, I think the problem is that then the patient steps out for 2 to 6 weeks. And I think that as cancer care started in the inpatient, switched to the outpatient, initially we were not aware of the gaps. And then slowly we started to become aware of the gaps, especially with the early studies in the fields of palliative care or in studies to do with cost. And as the Affordable Care Act put the emphasis on value-based care, people really started caring about these ER visits and hospitalizations. The next step was really understanding that it's not really just about cost, it was about the experience and outcome of care to the patients. And what I mean by that is several studies have shown that if we actually help patients in between those visits, if we interact with them more continuously and more proactively, we can find their problems, whether these be physical, emotional, practical or financial, spiritual or otherwise, and help those patients with those problems. We could actually not just keep them out of the hospital, but also keep them on treatment longer, which would lead to increases in survival that were pretty significant, as much as 20% across solid tumors.
Lavi, repeat that again. So just checking in with patients between visits can actually change how long they live?
Yeah, and we don't know the exact mechanism of how that works, but we have a few theories and we have some things that we have seen. So Canopy, to my knowledge, is the first of commercially available software platform that takes this sort of intervention and makes it possible and has published on clinical outcomes. And so we've published on the first 2 of those 3, meaning keeping patients out of the hospital, 22% less ER visits and hospitalizations, and presented that in ASCO recently in the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And then we've also published that for the top 5 oncology treatments, patients are able to persist on treatment longer. And so to Mike's question, I think that some of the treatments that we think of as most safe and least toxic in oncology, such as immunotherapy, even in those treatments, we have data today large-scale studies showing that up to half of the patients are not even able to tolerate the treatment. So it's not even about preference or adherence. It's about you literally, physically cannot stay on treatment any longer. You have very severe adverse events and toxicities that are dose limiting. And so if we are able to both manage these toxicities so patients could tolerate treatment and stay on it longer and get the benefit of these life-saving drugs, two, find and help them with medical emergencies or comorbidities with their heart failure, with strokes or heart attacks. And three, if we can find and tackle financial or practical problems or emotional and help them with that, the result of the combined effort would be that patients can persist on treatment, feel better, and have a better outcome. And that's really our mission here at Canopy.
And talk to me a little bit about your business model. So is the doctor paying for this, the patient, the payer, the hospital? How does this work?
Definitely not the patient. So Canopy partners with cancer centers. The biggest insight that Canopy has, in my view, or like I think that, you know, what Note Therapeutics are doing is incredible. Just to sort of compare and contrast, they are taking an approach that is more akin to a drug. Right? We're taking an intervention that has worked. We're validating that we can now do it via technology, and then we could get reimbursement. The masses can benefit from it. I think that's amazing. Our approach is the opposite. And so we're going to providers and we're helping them provide better care to all of their patients with the hope that we can build a solid foundation that on top of we could start to tackle these problems one by one in a more particular form. Physical problems, practical problems, emotional problems, etc. And so we partner with cancer centers with starting especially with community oncology practices, because we can help them become more efficient, offer better care for their patients. And part of that is that we can generate a business model for them for this work. So there are various ways to receive reimbursement for this sort of work, but these have just been so complicated and cumbersome and difficult to execute, and honestly not even profitable, but not even affordable for providers. And so the notion is, if we can make the physician's practice successful, if we can make the caregiver successful, we can make the patient successful. And to do that, we're both giving them the tools, but also the business model.
And talk to me a little bit about how this shows up for a patient. Is this, do they call in on a phone number, or is this an app on their phone? I mean, you know, if they need something, how do they connect with? Do they connect with you? Do you connect them to the practice? Are you like the telephone operator in the middle, or, you know, how exactly does this work?
Well, so to make it successful, I think that we need the patients connected to the practice, right? We don't have any sort of magical software solution that can fix a person's nausea or pain. But what we do is we are able to detect their problem earlier, escalate it to the practice, make sure that it's handled in the right sense of urgency, and make sure that it's handled thoroughly and in the highest quality fashion possible. So to do that, the first element is really to make sure we detect problems, and we can't do anything if the patients are not engaged. There's no device today known to me that can detect or measure, you know, nausea or pain or confusion, or a lot of the unpleasant toxicities of cancer care, or even anxiety or distress. And so to engage patients, and I think access is so important, the question is, how can we do it, given that not everyone will engage in the same modality? And so we both offer apps for your iPhone or your Android phone, as well as interactive voice response, which is sort of a fancy way of saying chatbots. So if for some reason you hate using your phone and using apps, or you don't have a smartphone, or you don't have a good internet service, so our chatbot will call the patient and ask them how they are feeling in a very targeted way, not like when you call one of those large call centers and you want to kill yourself, something more simple that is straightforward. You can't get lost there. And actually 10% of our patients report using that. I want to touch, Mike, you said in the beginning about, COVID and the perception and all of that. I think it's so important because I think we haven't had any huge advancement in technology in the past, call it 10 years, that has been a game changer. As much as after COVID, people now believe that the patients can do it. So 3 years ago, we were pitching, and people were like, no, my patients are too old. My patients are too sick. My patients don't speak English. My patients don't have a smartphone. And after COVID, nothing changed apart from the physicians and practices perception of their patients when suddenly every 90-year-old is FaceTiming, Zooming with their physicians or grandkids. And I literally had a 90-year-old call me to thank me recently. And so, yeah, I think that shows that.
So both for Jeff and Lavi, you're in really interesting space. Jeff, I think you had mentioned that you believe you are the first company, at least in the US, that's trying to get an FDA-approved cancer-specific mental health device. Lavi, you mentioned you are perhaps the first company that's out there for managing cancer complications, and the first or one of the first to have published on the effectiveness of your technology. So that sounds exciting. Technology, big market, healthcare, big market, and your first movers. But of course, you're first movers, so you haven't quite gotten to the finish line. Some I saw in our survey, we've got a number of investors who are listening in. Raising money, is this, like shooting a fish in a barrel? You explain it to them and they say, finally, somebody's doing what's totally logical, or has it been tricky? And also kind of looking around the corner, world's a little different now than it was 6 or 9 months from now. Guys sleeping well at night?
Try to sleep well, get a little bit of exercise, move through it. I think that's the, both Lavi and I have, I think, a background in the military. So keep moving. That's the thing, keep moving. A couple of Lavi's comments really resonated with me. We met with an investor in early 2019 who said, very similar. My patients, many of whom speak Spanish, not all of them understand the intricacies of some of what you're presenting. How are you going to reach, patients broadly across the United States in all kinds of different communities? And we really took that to heart. And I'm thrilled to completely, wholeheartedly agree with Lavi that this is 100% achievable and doable. We worked with health literacy specialists. We've got a really diverse team of creative designers who can make, sometimes a little bit complex stuff seem, very normal, and use animation to make this entirely approachable. And what we find is a lot of the liabilities of digital we're really able to overcome. And on the other side, and this is the other part of when you're awake at night thinking, is all of the potentials of digital. Low cost, 24/7, available when you need it. And then increasingly through the use of our collective understanding of machine learning, we're able to offer personalization that just might not exist in other parts of healthcare. And so I think a lot of people have touted technology as this and that. I love technology. I flew with it. I relied on it. It was fantastic. But ultimately, technology is just going to help humans do their work better. When I flew around in an airplane, we had a radar that put in front of our face a little green box, and that told us, hey, you can't see it yet with your human eye, but right behind that green box is an airplane 50, 60, 70 miles away. And as the airplane gets closer, all of a sudden you start to see a little tiny dot in the center of that green box. That's how I view technology in cancer, is it's just going to help our healthcare professionals see patients, see what's coming. Again, the use of data and artificial intelligence, if we use it ethically, it can help us even predict who's going to need what kind of care when. And if, there's tremendous potential. It just takes a lot of, a lot of work. Investors have been super excited probably about both of our companies in terms of what we can do in an area like cancer that is an enormous burden on our society, and it is a unequivocal societal priority to address it. And so I feel really good about being in cancer care, and I know I speak for our entire team. There's not a day we come to work that we're not touched by what we're doing and how we're using our professional time.
Great. Lavi, anything to add?
No, I think I want to echo everything Jeff said and receive the microphone. No, okay. I think I do echo everything that Jeff said. I would just say that, I think that if any founder ever got on any stage and just said, everything is amazing always, it's torturous being a founder. I would not recommend it upon the people I hate the most, and even when things are going great, it's really hard. And when things are going bad, it's hard. It's actually when things are going great, it's even harder, because it's I think starting a company is like rolling a boulder on a mountain, trying to have it roll off the other end and hit a tree or trying to cut down. And so you're pushing it up the mountain. Everyone's like, look at that guy. What the hell is he doing? And then when it's rolling, you're running after it like crazy, trying to direct it in the right direction. Everyone's looking at you saying, oh my God, of course that's going to roll off the mountain. I told them that's going to happen. But in between, you're the one pushing up and then running down. And so I think that with Canopy specifically, the bet is that if we can make providers successful, we can improve care for patients. And so initially we did everything in a super generic way for all cancers, for all tumors, for all patients, for all comorbidities. They got abilities to personalize, but roughly the same experience. And now as Canopy wants to make the next sort of order of magnitude benefit, we are wanting to personalize everything that we do. And that comes at great cost and investment. If we are to continue our sort of data-driven approach and use machine learning and technology and workflow tools to improve care, want to make it even better. Every drug is different, every cancer is different. That requires an investment. And so what Canopy is doing now is we're also partnering with life sciences companies. And so, take that example of immunotherapy, multi-billion-dollar blockbuster drugs. Can we make Canopy even better if every patient on one of those drugs had a personalized experience to that drug? Similar to, I'm sure, how in Blue Note, if you're suffering anxiety or depression or a completely different problem, you're not getting the same solution exactly, right? And so what we're wanting to do now is partner with those life science companies to both research these problems, when now with Canopy, we for the first time ever have real world data on these issues, see what really patients are struggling with and which of these problems actually lead to a hospitalization or a discontinuation versus discomfort. How can we better tackle them? And then run studies that we've tackled them. And I think that approach really resonates with investors, because as you think about sort of everything we've done in oncology, while it's obvious that, the oncologist can't walk home with their patient and then look over their shoulder all day long. In the same regard, I think that investors really resonate with the fact that pharma produce multi-billion-dollar drugs that are life-saving, but once the medicine has left the factory, the life sciences company has nothing to do to impact really how it is really being managed in the real world. And so
Lavi, let me double down on that and maybe ask you just to be a little more granular from one of the questions we've gotten in the Q&A. Thank you.
Yep.
And that is your application sort of drug class agnostic, meaning, does it only work if you're getting a chemotherapy, but doesn't work if you're getting an immunotherapy? And there's a lot of new therapies. The person asking today was talking about CAR T and some of these other things. And some drugs have awful weird side effects. So when you say personalized, are you talking about it would be useful if we knew what the patient's diagnosis was and the actual therapy they were getting? Is that what you're implying?
Yeah, so I think let's take one example to make it simpler, okay? Let's take an example of immunotherapy, because CAR T is too complicated. I really appreciate the question, but I think not everyone have the context on what CAR T is and how it works. So let's say that immunotherapy drugs help sort of, I think the marketing jargon these days, unleash the immune system. But what it really means is we're taking the cancer cells and demasking them in a way. We're removing the cloak and letting the immune system see where the cancer is, and thereby creating more of the natural interaction where the immune system would attack the cancer. The obvious problem with that is as you stimulate the immune system further, you might have it attacking parts of your body. And so the problem with that is if that happens, the patient is not getting aggressive management of that issue, of that immune system attacking our own body. They cannot stay on that treatment. And often that is a life-saving treatment where the second line doesn't even come close if you're talking about melanoma or lung cancer or some metastatic cancers. Now, our platform is agnostic. We support everyone and everything across radiation, surgery, systemic treatment, chemotherapy, targeted therapy, etc. However, we do recognize that starting to get more specific is going to be better for patients and for their outcomes. So in this example of immunotherapy, let's just say that if you had a rash, just as an example, that might indicate that your body is attacking itself. And maybe after a rash, you could have kidney failure or something horrible like that. But you have to detect that super early. So what we might do is we might ask the patients every day or every other day now with this drug if they're having a rash. If they are having a rash, we'll make sure to quickly triage and distinguish if that rash has anything to do with the treatment or not. And if it does, and we escalate that to a nurse at the practice, we might have a pathway to support the nurse's judgment and decision-making in effectively and quickly both understanding if that patient needs to be seen, and if so, what needs to happen. And so we're basically helping detect that problem, streamline care, make sure it's the highest possible care in the shortest possible time.
What about kids? Either of your applications going to be effective in children with cancer?
Jeff, do you want to go first or?
Sure, I'll start first. Right now, we're focused on age 18 and up, and that's really to make sure that it matches with the clinical data that we're generating, and our requested label can be really grounded in high quality evidence. However, the amount of work that we are doing is absolutely applicable to people who are young adults, adolescents. Fortunately, this is, not the majority, right? With the majority of patients in the sort of 66 median range, our challenge, we look at the opportunity to serve, pediatric patients as a real future growth area for us. We have products that are designed in a way to be accessible to those patients. But also we've focused a lot on seniors on the other side of that spectrum as well. A lot of times people say, oh, technology, is that going to be, accessible to people of all ages? And our view is it's down to us as the designers to make sure that the technology is super easy to use, that everybody who needs it can use it. So for us, pediatrics is a future growth area.
Lavi?
Yeah, I would say very similar, with a slight differentiation that I think as we look at cancer, I think in adults, it tends to be far more chronic and a long-term problem than children who, a lot of them have an excellent prognosis and will have a shorter duration of treatment, whereby this long-term management of toxicities, financial concerns, and otherwise is not as much of an issue. But definitely a growth area. And I have to say something that is really touching for me personally. And I would love to, can't wait to enter that space and to learn more and to see how we could help. And I'm sure there are a lot of unique challenges.
There's been a bit of a disruptor in the healthcare ecosystem, or potential disruptor, in the last week with Amazon's announcement that it was going to purchase a large sort of primary care company that mostly served employers. I think 8,000 different employers. Is this sort of true and irrelevant? How do big moves like this, and the future of how healthcare is delivered, is this important event for a company like a Blue Note or a Canopy, or is this unclear if this is going to have any impact on your companies?
Well, I would just say I moved back from Denmark to help found Blue Note, and it was wonderful to see and experience Scandinavian healthcare. And I'm just excited to see movement in US healthcare and primary care. For us, we're very fortunate in the sense that with a mission that's focused on easing the burden of cancer and improving outcomes, we have the ability to really focus on every aspect of cancer care. So primary care, it's important, and we hope that that also leads to better screening, earlier diagnosis, better treatment. So our wishes are with all of you in continuing to improve the healthcare system. But for Blue Note, we're focused on cancer. That's what we're all about.
Talking about focused on cancer, how do you identify, one of the questions that came in, how do you identify, you had mentioned you'd been connected through your trial to 14,000 patients. What are the tools you use to, identify what patient might benefit from Blue Note? And is there sort of an escalation, where if you see something alarming, the person is actually connected back to their healthcare team or to a psychiatrist or psychologist if it looks like things are heading in the wrong direction?
That's a great question. Lavi, do you want to go first, and then I can maybe address how we're doing at Blue Note?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment actually on your previous question, Mike.
Okay.
I think this specific question was wholly targeted to you, Jeff. So just it's interesting because, I come from tech. And so a friend of mine asked me the other day what I think about Amazon's acquisition and if I think it was because of the data. And no, I think it has, it's nice. It's a nice thought direction of thinking, but I think it has nothing to do with the data. I think companies like Apple and Amazon, they have to continue to grow. That's just how we set up the stock market and our society. And if you look around, there aren't many big markets. There's no more carcasses left for them to tackle. It's got to be automobile and healthcare. Where else are you going to find a fully ready for disruption $3 trillion industry where we spend so much and everyone is unhappy? And I think that these entrants, Apple, Amazon, Google, into healthcare, I think are going to be incredible for us because they can't tackle every problem. They're not going to kill my company or Jeff's company. They're going to tackle big infrastructure problems and they're going to generate pressure for existing incumbents to actually innovate and get going. I think they're going to be wonderful for everyone in so many ways. So yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited for that.
All right. Well, that's we're going to have to get you on Amazon's board as soon as possible, it sounds like.
Michael, do you want me to hit
Yes.
the 14,000 patients? So we've used a lot of social media techniques, and we have a really fantastic team of scientists who are focused on how can we combine digital ads, awareness of research, how to communicate the the benefits of research and navigate some of the components that are important around informed consent. This is all important medical ethics, but it can be a lot for a patient to take in addition to cancer. So we've been really fortunate. Our goal at the outset of this was to recruit a representative population of Americans. And that means that we had to do a just frankly better job of reaching people who might not historically have participated in research, might be from underserved communities. And so I think the promise of using social media for good, for purposes of making them aware of research opportunities and the ability to participate, also to know that we really want them and are seeking their participation in this research. You know, I think there's a lot that we'll continue to build on, and maybe a little bit unexpectedly, this is going to become a really important part of how Blue Note operates and does research. In terms of the inevitable challenges that can, you know, intersect with research in terms of patients needing crisis management and support, we've had our eye on this, you know, really from the very first sets of prototypes of our products. We knew that it was absolutely unacceptable for a patient using a digital technology to need help and need a human and not be able to get it, that was not an acceptable outcome. And so we've worked to create a range of resources that surround the patient user in our platforms. Some of that is through asynchronous chat in the device. Others are using a wonderful call center of conscientious Blue Note staff who are resources to help patients, and also some of the public. And of course, you know, as a country, we're investing more and more in crisis support. And as Blue Note, we can also in the app refer patients to those resources as well. So I think, you know, I'm proud of the fact that we take really seriously the responsibility that comes with healthcare, and we want our patients to thrive. We want them to get, you know, the very best outcomes possible and relieve as much of the burden as we possibly can.
Lavi, and then maybe back to Jeff. You know, one of the things that we sometimes talk about in the interface of a patient and technology is not only is the app nifty, but is there user fatigue? Is there ongoing interactions between the application and the patient? So, and I think one of you mentioned, you know, if they need to get in touch with the app at 2 a.m., if they're next to their phone, they can do that. Do either of you have statistics on, you know, patients sticking with, remaining attached to the application, and are they really checking in at 2 a.m.? And I know, Jeff, your application has sort of multiple chapters or sequences. So well, why don't we start with you, Lavi? What do you know about, you know, the patient? And is it once and done, or do they actually stick with it?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of companies who have published, oh yeah, we've had an app and we've had thousands of patients and this and that. And I think it was really important for us that before we say we reduced ER visits or we did this or we did that, that we show that it's even possible. And so our first publication in the American Society of Clinical Oncology last year was just about that. It was about, we went to one practice, how many of the patients chose to engage, to sign up, how many were actually engaged, how long did they stay, and were nurses able to really respond to them and help them. And we published on 82% of the patients opting in, and 90% of them still engaged, not signed up, but still engaged in reporting 9 months in, and up to 70% of them 12 months in, which honestly blew me away. And I think the third data point explains it. 70% of the problems that patients had were addressed by a nurse in under 24 hours. And so it's not sort of, again, anchoring to, it's not a magical solution to patients' problems through some app. It's more of, it's almost like a lifeline for a patient. It's a way to express your problems and your needs and then get the support that you need. And so that really was our insight, that if we can make the care team successful, if they could get to their patients fast enough, there's no greater incentive for patients to stay engaged.
Great. Jeff, you get the final word. We're at the top of the hour. How have you found engagement?
I think it's a really important pursuit. We're getting better and better. Right now, we've got about 65 patients, 65% that engage, each 3 days. And I would say really encouraging, well north of 50% tracking along all the way through the course of therapy. So that's the dose response, correlation that we're looking for. A lot of that comes down to the design and having a really rich, diverse design team that can make the content approachable for everybody.
Great. All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for what I found to be a really interesting discussion, and I'll turn it back to Robbie.
Thank you, Dr. Seiden, for moderating this important conversation, Jeff and Lavi. And I'll just repeat what Priya Hayes and Sankar Sundaresan have said here. Thanks for a fantastic webinar, very informative. Thank you for organizing this, very useful for a caregiver. So thank you both. Olivia, thank you all three of you. Olivia?
Well, I think that's it. But thank you everyone so much for joining, and thank you Dr. Seiden, Jeff, and Lavi for participating. And then I'll send out the recording shortly after this event.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.